A new era of spaceflight has dawned with NASA's Artemis program, which aims to establish a base camp on the Moon and lay groundwork for a future trip to Mars. The U.S. Space Agency will send humans back to the lunar surface in 2025, but its manned missions to the Red Planet won't take place until the 2030s. But why would we have to leave the Earth? Here are some main reasons. Global warming. Biodiversity loss. Plastic pollution. Deforestation. Air pollution. 9 out of 10 people breathe air that contains high levels of pollutants. Melting ice caps and sea level rise. Food and water insecurity. These are some of the major issues due to which we won't be able to live on Earth in coming years. Now question arise, can humans live on Mars? What would it look like? This video is divided into 3 main parts. First, how do we get to Mars and how will we colonize there? Second, challenges of living on Mars. Third, what living on Mars could do to the human body. Please subscribe the channel before you proceed. Part 1. How we will go to Mars. The furthest we have sent astronauts is to the Moon, about 240,000 miles away. This is small fry compared to the 35 million mile journey to Mars. Reaching the Red Planet will require some serious hardware. NASA will use its new heavy-lift rocket, the Space Launch System, SLS, to propel Orion, the new generation of spacecraft, into space. The SLS is more powerful than any previous rocket, firing over 8.4 million pounds of thrust, equal to 135 Boeing 747s. The computers running the software on Orion have the ability to handle 480 million instructions per second. There's been speculation that astronauts will be put into hypersleep, a therapeutic coma, during the journey to Mars, and kept alive intravenously, to conserve resources. How will we colonize on Mars? People have to live inside a capsule-looking homes. Because atmosphere outside is not suitable for human living. There are some ideas proposed by scientists for colonizing on Mars. 1. 3D printed shell with garden. One of the remarkable designs comes from Team Yates from Mississippi, who came up with this beautiful virtual vision of potential Mars habitation. The design was specifically created to withstand dust storms and harsh climates that can be found on the Red Planet. This ethereal structure is designed to build itself once it has safely landed on Mars. The launched module robotically expands into a very sleek, shell-like model which then 3D prints the interior layers of the building. Inside, a spiral staircase winds down into the small garden, which would allow any inhabitants to grow plants and food. 2. Self-sufficient robot-built home. In a particularly desolate environment such as the Red Planet, it's important that a home is self-sufficient and protective. Luckily, this out-of-this-world home by Zophorus, which is inspired by Earth-based biology such as honeycombs and spiderwebs, is both of those things. Once landed on a suitable spot, it begins the 3D printing process. Impressively, Zophorus creation deploys autonomous robots that gather useful materials from the surrounding environment to use in printing, creating a special blend of Martian concrete that absorbs harmful radiation. Inside, the communal shell is the building's social hub, where astronauts can absorb breathtaking views from the mezzanine level and grow plants and greenery on an elevated shelf. There is an abundance of useful features built into the residence, such as storage cubbies and air locking facilities. The technology can also make additional prints once landed, and it's even able to produce more interlocking domes for future residents. How's that for a luxury home? 3. Sustainable space housing. In collaboration with Mars One, a project which seeks to establish a permanent community on the planet by 2025, he imagined a series of UFO-style homes on Mars that could explore the possibilities of outer space living. A must-have for the housing unit is sustainability, so a key feature of one of Versteeg's dome designs, reminiscent of Cornwall's Eden project, is its ability to grow produce. Part 2. Challenges of living on Mars. There are 4 primary necessities for human survival. These are water, shelter, food, and oxygen. And these are all issues that we must address as we ponder, can people live on Mars? Water on Mars. Scientists have found water on Mars, but not in the same form it's found on Earth. There is some water on the surface and below, but because of the extreme cold on Mars, it is all ice. And not the ice like we experience on Earth. On Earth, ice is just water, but on Mars, with the high levels of CO2, ice contains water ice mixed with CO2 ice. There is also water inside of rocks, but the lack of surface water would be a challenge for humans wanting to settle on Mars. Scientists continue to learn more about Mars, which will help them find out where we could obtain water from. Anticipating human occupation, a sneak peek inside Mars One's living quarters reveals a forward-looking living space built around sociability. Food on Mars. Growing food on Mars won't look like the farms that we have on Earth. Instead, crops would need to be grown without soil, such as tank farming or aquaculture. This is where the food would be planted in nutrient-rich water and fed with artificial lights. Some scientists have discussed creating a more suitable atmosphere for growing food on Mars. That would involve adding some greenhouse gases into the Martian atmosphere to make it thicker. However, due to the enormity of that project, it's more realistic to think that humans living on Mars would rely on aquaculture. Air on Mars. Humans need oxygen to survive. And the Earth provides plenty in our atmosphere. So, one of the biggest challenges of putting people on the planet is the shortage of oxygen. The air on Mars is thinner than that on Earth. On Earth, 21% of the air is oxygen, which is what makes it the ideal place for human life. But on Mars, oxygen makes up 0.13% of the air. The majority is carbon dioxide, which is harmful to humans. NASA has been experimenting with MOXIE, an instrument that would convert CO2 to oxygen on Mars. So far, this instrument on the Mars Perseverance rover has managed to successfully create oxygen from CO2. This leads the way for bigger experiments and possibilities for air on Mars. Other challenges of living on Mars. Aside from the necessities to sustain life, there are other challenges that people would face if they were to live on Mars. For example, the temperature gets very, very cold at night, below -100 degrees Fahrenheit. Mars also has dust storms, high levels of radiation, and less gravity than Earth. So, before we can start to call the red planet home, we'll need to solve these problems. Part 3. What living on Mars could do to the human body. Here are some important points. Radiation. It's already well known to scientists that Mars has an incredibly thin atmosphere, around 0.6% of that of Earth, meaning it's constantly bombarded by intense galactic cosmic radiation and solar protons. Any human on its surface would be exposed to this extreme rate of harmful radiation, and at risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, brain damage, and cognitive decrements, and much more. According to a 2019 study led by the European Space Agency, Mars astronauts could be bombarded with 700 times the radiation experienced on Earth, and a 2020 study found astronauts will be exposed to radiation 2.6 times higher than on board the International Space Station, raising their risk of cancer and infertility. Microgravity. Microgravity presents a serious issue for astronauts during long-term space flight, as it decreases bone density, increases the risk of bone fractures and degrades muscle performance. In space, the lack of gravity means muscles barely have to work, and astronauts have a vigorous exercise routine to stop them from losing large amounts of muscle mass. On Earth, each time a person sits or stands, gravity draws blood into the legs. The work the heart does to keep blood flowing, as it counters Earth's gravity, helps it maintain its size and function. Removing gravitational effects causes this performance of the heart to lessen, and it steadily shrinks, according to a 2021 study. It's also thought microgravity increases the pressure of fluid inside the head, potentially at the back of the eyes, which can damage vision. Mars dust. On Mars, the arid and freezing conditions average -80 degrees Fahrenheit at mid-latitudes, making the red planet seem inhospitable to life, but the rocky surface is also covered in extinct volcanoes, canyons, and debris, with regular meteor impacts and ongoing risk for any future colonists. Malnutrition. Aside from all the atmospheric and environmental issues of Mars itself, another issue is the potential lack of food and resulting malnutrition. An abundance of carbon dioxide, CO2, would be ideal for plant growth, if it weren't for a lack of sunlight, water, and radiation. Nightly temperatures of around -73 degrees Celsius means crops would be destroyed, outside of heated growth chambers. Although a Martian diet would hardly fulfill the body's needs, there have been promising signs that humans could at least eat enough to survive. So it was a detailed video about Plant Mars. Do you think we will able to colonize Mars? What was your favorite part about this video? Comment down. And subscribe the channel for more informative videos.